Good evening, everybody. Today is Friday, September 11th, 2020. My name is Bill Woodcock,
And I'm Jason Booms.
and you are watching or listening to another exciting episode of Forward Maryland. Jason, I have to say I'm a little bit shocked to notice your attire today. I see you are wearing red. I am hoping that is not white stitching on the front of your shirt. What does it say? It hopefully does not say what I fear it says, does it?
Oh, it definitely does not say that, and it's terrible that the color has been co-opted in recent years. This is actually my other September 11th shirt. This is sort of a recognition, I should say, of Dr. Salvador Allende and the coup which removed him from office on this day in 1973, when he was overthrown by the military, the CIA, and the fascistic elements of the Chilean military.
Would you agree it was the only good thing Nixon ever did?
Nixon's a tool. But I have no further commentary on President Nixon.
Oh.
Unless you want to hear 5 hours of ranting about Haldeman and Ehrlichman.
No. We have other pressing matters nearer to our Howard County home to discuss.
F. Chuck Colson. I'm sorry, what?
I have triggered Jason, everybody. Please look out.
I'm down with it. We want to talk about Nixon for a few hours? Let's go.
Yeah,
Awesome.
random posting the Facebook group starting at 8:00 tonight, folks. So our guest this evening, and we've been and I thank our guest for his extreme patience in coming on the show. I believe I asked him originally, like about 8 months ago, about being on the show, and then life. History is always relevant, and history is certainly, this has been a year to make history. And, how does our history inform our present? Does it predict our future? These are fascinating questions. And Howard County is blessed to have a wonderful organization, the Howard County Historical Society, that serves to preserve the history of Howard County. And we are honored this evening to be talking to the executive director of the Howard County Historical Society. His name is Shawn Gladden. Shawn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and tell us a little bit about what the Historical Society does.
Oh, okay. Well, I think first and foremost, I am officially a Howard Countyan, although I guess I should be more specific and say I'm a Colombian. My family moved here in 1980, so I came here for the schools, right? At the tender age of 6 years old. I've been here ever since, except for a brief stint in Virginia Beach in Florida. I've lived here my entire life, even came back with my kids and raised a family here. So I am a Howard Countyan through and through. I'm also I guess you could say I'm a historian. I have a bachelor's degree in history from Towson University, except when I went there, it was Towson State. And I have a master's degree in history from George Mason. I've worked at the Maryland Historical Society. I was the curator at the Baltimore Museum of Industry. And obviously, most recently, the director of the Historical Society. I also teach history over at Howard Community College. So somehow I have taken my extreme history nerdness and turned it into a paycheck, which is great.
Nice.
So,
Dream right there.
yeah. So because the baseball thing didn't work out, so I went to option B. But yeah, it's great. I mean, the Howard County Historical Society was founded in 1958. For the most part, it was founded by the Clark family. Senator Clark, who many of us longtime Howard Countyans are familiar with. Martha Clark of Clark Elliott's Farm's father. His mother founded the Historical Society, Alda Hopkins Clark. Alda Hopkins Clark has some significant lineage in the state. She is not only she married into the Clark family, but she's also an Ellicott and a Hopkins. So there's a deep historical connection between the Clark family and the founding of the Historical Society. I was brought on board in 2013 after being curator at the Museum of Industry, and it's been great. I mean, we've really been able to do some wonderful things. We have 2 great facilities, an archives on the 2nd floor of Miller Library, and then the Museum of Howard County History, which is in old Ellicott City. We are in the process of restoring the 2nd Quaker Schoolhouse in Ellicott City, which is right next to the museum, and that'll be open in 2022 as a children's history museum. So that's me and what we're doing over at the HCHS.
Terrific. That is fantastic. So what are the how has the pandemic been affecting you? How long were you closed? How are you open now? And what are some things that are interesting that would be interesting to the visitor were they to come to the museum?
Yeah, so just like everybody else, COVID kind of derailed what we had planned. We this year we decided, much like many other organizations, to honor the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, and we had a year-long program we call the Year of the Howard County Woman. And what we've been doing is there was a social media component, which we continue to do. Every week, every Friday, we profile another significant woman from Howard County's history. I think we're up to 37 now. And there was supposed to be a corresponding exhibit, which we were going to open at the Howard County Fair, but COVID.
Right.
But we went along with the online component, and we do have a small exhibit at the museum, which is open on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 1 to 5. We have a small exhibit in there on women's suffrage. It's a little traveling exhibit from Smithsonian, and we have a dress from the collection that's on exhibit, in addition to the permanent exhibit at the museum. So, despite what happened and everything pretty much being derailed this year, we were still able to do some programming and serve the community the best way we can. So.
Jason, do you have anything right now?
Oh, absolutely. I have many questions. Well, I wanted to start with sort of maybe a historian.
Leave Nixon alone.
And let me tell you why Johnson is. But as far as from an historian's perspective, do you have a favorite era in Howard County history?
I guess it's hard to say favorite. I mean, I tend right now. I'm focusing a lot of my research on what I think is not only the most under-researched and under-told part of Howard County history, but really United States history, and that would be the Reconstruction era, the time after the Civil War. And it's very interesting here in Howard County. I've been given some lectures the last couple of years on this, but I'm still kind of developing and digging to find a little bit more. But basically, and there's a lot that can be learned from where we are now in Howard County and what happened after the Civil War. Case in point, the Confederate monument that used to be out back of the courthouse. The questions I received around the time that was removed was, how come this is here? And obviously people forget that before Columbia, Howard County was a very different place. And for all intents and purposes, you look at Howard County, I mean, it was a slave county and a slave state, and pretty much divided loyalties between North and South. So looking at Reconstruction, there's a lot of very interesting storylines from that, because when Confederate soldiers came home here in Howard County, unlike down in the South where they were ostracized and they couldn't hold office, they couldn't serve in any militias, not here in Howard County. All those returning Confederates came home and were county commissioners, judges, sheriffs. So there was no Reconstruction as far as what Lincoln or what the radical Reconstructionists would have called Reconstruction in Howard County. They just came back, and everybody was like, well, hey, you were a Yankee. Hey, you were a Reb. All right, well, back to business as usual. So I'm really spending a lot of time looking at that. And in recent months, I think because of the climate, the national climate, my office is beginning inundated with questions about slavery in Howard County and the plantations and the names of streets and all these things. So, yeah, I've been focusing on mostly 1800s. So favorite, I don't know if I have a favorite, but that's what I'm diving into right now.
Actually, that's fascinating because I really hadn't given it. Now, granted, I didn't go to public schools in Maryland, so perhaps people were exposed to this a little bit more. But I'm just curious that I know, for example, certain counties in Tennessee seceded from the Confederacy because you had some, still supporters of the Union that were there. I was not aware of the degree to which in Maryland, how much Reconstruction really impacted, because it was, technically, yes, it was a northern state. So, I mean, that has to be a fascinating series of storylines, just in terms of reconciling, what happened with, soldiers down south versus the ones who resided locally.
Yeah.
And there was...
Well, historically, Maryland, everybody there are narratives, right, about what Northerners did and what Southerners did. And Maryland doesn't fit into either because Maryland is very different. It always has been. It's always been considered the middle state for a reason because it had features of both North and South. So, and if I were to make an argument out of all the counties, what county in Maryland represented that same dichotomy would be us. So.
That's a fascinating insight, and I'm really interested to hear you saying that, Shawn, because I grew up here too. I mean, I've been to Gettysburg and I've seen the Maryland monuments for the Confederate battalions that were Maryland and the Union battalions that were Maryland. And I'm not sure how many other states can say that they had heavy losses on both sides. And of course, the history, Ellicott City being a depot for soldiers of both sides to travel through.
Yep.
But when I hear you, talk about the dichotomy, I just finished my big brain dump vanity project on my blog about writing about at least my family's history in Howard County, and then just observations on community here. And I guess what I walked away from with this writ large was that there is still that dichotomy. It's different. It's not as stark as in the 1860s, but as you mentioned, you're a Howard Countyan, but then also there's Columbia. And here came this big town 53 plus years ago that, changed things. And, we see national politics, impact Howard County and the way we discuss issues as a community. So to think that it's always been that way, or at least it's been that way for, I forget when Howard County was founded, when it split off from Anne Arundel.
1851.
Yeah. Oh, so it's almost 170 years. I'm not sure what the question is here, but I guess what I'm wondering is, how do you see that there's maybe not a direct lineage, but do you see that the problems that we're having now have been problems that have existed for a much longer time, in terms of people loggerheads?
Yeah, I don't want to fall into the trap of trying to, compare some of our national trends to our local trends. But,
right.
To be honest with you, there are some parallels. Howard County's makeup, if we're looking at the antebellum period, Howard County's always been a Democrat-leaning county. Now, as we all know, as those of us who have opened up a history book know and understand anything about politics, the Democrats of the 1800s are very different from the Democrats of the 2000s. So But one thing is for sure is the identity of the Democratic Party in the 1800s very much fit into line with what Howard County was. Very rural, a lot of slave owners. And for the most part, Howard County has been, and even its politics well into the 20th century, always seemed to be like a southern state. And then when things changed was Howard County, was Columbia. Columbia drastically changed not only the demographics, but obviously the political makeup of the county. I mean, and look at the interesting side of it, right? I mean, we look at obviously Republicans, Democrats in a certain way, and I think it's harder to identify who those were and some of those political figures were when we go back in our own county's history. You look at the Democrats in our county's history, like Edwin Warfield was, I guess one could say his record on race or his politics on race were sketchy at best. Meanwhile, you've got a Republican like Robert Kittleman, who was in the end, president of the NAACP. So, the politics have always been a little bit interesting, but after Columbia, we settle into the same national patterns that we've seen anywhere, and Columbia obviously goes a little bit more progressive with the diversity. Interesting, it's a funny side story to the Columbia Howard County thing. When I first got hired by the Historical Society, one of my long-term volunteers, who she's actually a sixth generation Warfield, so she's straight Howard County all the way back to the beginning. And when they hired me, I met her, sweet woman's been with the organization for a while. And she said, "Oh, I heard you grew up in Howard County." I said, "Yeah, I grew up." And I told her where I grew up. And she says, "Oh, you grew up in Columbia." Sweetest lady in the world. But you could tell even the old school Western Howard County folks, there's two different counties here. Right. And to some extent, it has been like that. Ellicott City and Elkridge and Savage were always different voting blocks than Western Howard County. That's for sure. So,
well, I don't know if you remember, but Councilman Charlie Figge, when he was on the county council, whenever anybody would go up to speak, the first question he would ask them after they were done speaking was, "How long have you lived in Howard County?"
Yep. And well, the woman I was just talking about, who was my long-term volunteer, that's Charlie's wife. It's Barbara Figge.
Okay, I know Barbara. Yeah.
Yeah, Barbara's sweet. She teases me all the time about. I'm sorry.
Oh no! Go ahead.
I was gonna say she teases me all the time about being new blood. I'm new blood, Howard County.
It's like the Eastern Shore story about the 105-year-old woman who moves to the shore at 4. And her obituary says, "Baltimore woman died in the hospital."
Yeah, right.
Jason, I'm sorry. I stepped over you before. You had a question.
No. I just had a question. I'd like to hear a bit more about the origin story of Howard County. Obviously, there's the Wikipedia. This is what happened. Times, dates, blah blah. And but in terms of the establishment of the county itself, was it because of population growth mandated the split from Anne Arundel? Were there other power dynamics at play? What really led to the creation?
Mostly, I mean, it's always a mixture of a bunch of different things. But, as it was originally founded, it was Upper Anne Arundel County or Upper Arundel. I can't remember whether they called it one thing or the other. And in 1838, there was a Dr. William Watkins who suggested and I think it was mainly for legal reasons, because they were obviously by 1838, the local courts were handling more cases, and I believe they needed an additional court in Ellicott City. And I think this is when they started talking about building the circuit court. And so they decided to make Howard District. And that was 1838. And then within 13 years, the push was to make it its own county. And most of that was economic. By 1851, Ellicott City is one of the most traversed towns economically along the national road in the state. So with the sheer amount of business that's coming through Ellicott City, the growth of the population, like anything, I think it's a number of different factors. But by 1851, we're our own county.
And just to get a sense of scale, roughly, you have a sense of what the population looked like around 1850, 1851 in Howard County?
Oh, man, you know what? I just gave a presentation the other day where I had all those numbers, and I can't recall.
That's right, because I was just trying to picture a much more pastoral Howard County, and
30,000 people in the 1850s, maybe 1860s. 30,000 sounds about right, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more. Imagine I'm like visualizing this chart that I have, and all the numbers are blending together. So I'm gonna somewhere in that range, I think.
Cool, awesome.
So looking at things that are going on today, looking at the pandemic, what have you come across? Have you come across anything Howard County oriented from the Spanish flu pandemic? And if you did, what did you find interesting?
We actually did we publish a quarterly newsletter where we myself and my deputy director Paulette Lutz will research something from the archives, and we'll publish like a little local article, or we'll bring in guests, either historians or journalists, to write for us. And Paulette did something on the Spanish flu, and whereas there isn't, we went through the archives, and we didn't find a whole lot in our archives from like personal papers of Howard County is writing about it, but we found plenty of news articles and information on an outbreak that happened at Fort Meade, which seems to have affected Howard County. In the article, it's just fascinating because everybody loves to say history repeats itself, and as much as that makes every historian cringe just a little, it's not that history repeats itself, just human beings keep doing the same stupid shit over and over again. But we as human beings, we do follow very similar patterns. So when you look at the 1918 Spanish flu, we have the same stuff. The maskers versus the anti-maskers, the people who think it's political, and it's, and we also had Woodrow Wilson at the time. Also, there's plenty of blame to lay at his feet because he wouldn't even mention the word flu at all. And he was trying, but obviously there was a lot of complications with World War I and treated it of Versailles and so on and so forth. But there's so many parallels, and you read these newspaper sources, and you're just like, Jesus. Like I could copy and paste an article from 1918, put 2020 at the top of it, and you guys would think it's exactly the same.
Wow.
So that part is interesting. I think the big difference, obviously, as we all know, is communication and social media and the ability for news to move a lot faster. But, and obviously, news moved a lot slower back then, but the reactions were all still the same.
I'm just curious, and obviously, we can spend a great deal of time talking about the lack of transparency in the Wilson administration. But I'm just curious, so as far as when Howard County became recognizably Howard County, was that with Columbia becoming part of the scene, or would you pick another sort of tipping point for the county where it went from very rural agrarian to something that's a bit more suburby?
Yeah, post World War II, much like the rest of the suburbanization, because obviously, Columbia, in the fashion of Levittown, right, the suburbanization trend. Columbia doesn't come along until the 1960s, but you do see some suburbanization occurring in places like Elkridge and, like I said, Savage and other different places. But the construction of Route 40 is huge. Route 40 replaces what was 144 going through Ellicott City. And you know, there's a lot of drastic changes to Howard County, because up until probably the 1910s into the 1920s, Ellicott City is you know, kind of a great place to go shop. It is what you would, you know, consider to be one of Howard County's best shopping centers. The Great Depression really is going to affect Ellicott City. And then after World War II, when they start building Route 40, nobody wants to take 144 anymore. So with less and less people coming through Ellicott City goes into serious decline and becomes kind of a rough and tumble, you know, place. As once again, Barbara Figge would tell me, oh, when I was a little girl, I wasn't allowed to go to Ellicott City, you know? So, and
in all fairness, it is known as a place of many shady characters to this day. But
it is. This is true. I can name a few of them right now, but I will not. So I mean, I guess just like anything, there are various phases in Howard County's history where it makes its identity changes, and certainly one of the first shipping points away from, you know, from rural to suburban is going to be I'd say Route 40. Because think about all the farms that Route 40 went through, right? And then you know, then by the 1960s, Rouse is buying up the farmland for Columbia. So I think it starts in the 1950s and goes on through, and of course we're still developing today.
And I do have one question as far as, I mean, because obviously you've come across so much information about Howard County through your research. Is there one individual that you think is sort of the most unheralded Howard Countian that we should all be thinking or talking about?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I've got a few, and I think at the Historical Society, we try, one of the things we really like to do, that's what we're doing this Year of the Howard County Woman thing, is we love to pull figures out of our archives that nobody's ever heard of before, or maybe, obviously, longtime Howard Countians will be familiar with the name, and nobody really knows what they've done, and for us to find 50 significant women in our county's history, I mean, that's something, but also, obviously, you know, we all know that United States history has been whitewashed pretty significantly. You know, that the revision back to correct that began in the 60s and 70s, but still have a long way to go. I can tell you right now, the history in our county is as whitewash can be. You know, the last academic history of Howard County was written, it was in 1968, and it was by the grandson of a Confederate officer, and it's glaringly absent of any African American history. So as we try to pull these pieces, we're trying to counterbalance. So Decatur Dorsey is one that we at the Historical Society think we as Howard Countians should all be celebrating this man. He was a former slave who was freed in 1864 so he could go and fight for the Union Army. He serves in the United States Colored Troops and wins the Congressional Medal of Honor at the Battle of Petersburg. In 1864, he was the color bearer for the Battle of Petersburg. So here's a former slave, Howard Countian, Medal of Honor winner, and I can tell you maybe more than 90% of Howard County has no idea who this guy is. So right off the top of my head, I'd say that, but I could probably rattle off a dozen more.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, I had no idea.
See? Well, this being...
And me neither.
I'm sorry?
And me neither. I mean, does Howard County even have another Congressional Medal of Honor winner?
I don't know. That's a good question. A few Purple Heart winners, but I don't know. He may be the only one.
That's what I'm thinking.
So now this month is International Underground Railroad Month, and last week Dr. Ball had we did a proclamation, we did a little thing online, and I mentioned 3 figures from our Underground Railroad research, and I was kind of telling them all that. I said, Calvin, man, if you want like somebody to focus on the whole month, here he is, Decatur Dorsey, man. Go, send this out to your people, get this out there, But I mean, we've got so many figures like that in our county that I got another one. We all know Frederick Douglass, right? Frederick Douglass escapes from slavery, becomes an orator and an abolitionist. Well, we had one here in Howard County named Oliver Cromwell Gilbert. He was a slave at Walnut Creek in Clarksville. He escapes in 1836, right around the same time Frederick Douglass does, makes his way to New Hampshire, has his freedom bought, almost a parallel story to Douglass's story. And he becomes an orator and abolitionist in New Hampshire. The only reason we know his story is because his great-great-great-granddaughter did her master's thesis on him and sent us this paper. So, there's tons of stories like this.
And that's amazing, Shawn. And it's also sad because there's likely so much of value that is lost that we will probably never learn about.
Well, hopefully we'll be able, my goal is to, we just completely redid our website, and I'm trying to work on some of the functionality of it, but I really would love our website and our databases to be the resource for local history in the county, whether you're doing it out of general interest or whether you're doing it as a part of a school project. So part of what I'm trying to do is make everyone aware of the wonderful resources we have at the Historical Society. So if you like any of this stuff I'm talking about, I mean, I got rooms full of this stuff. It's just these are stories that are waiting to be told and shared. So, yeah.
Well, so to change gears to a little bit of a lighter note, as all 3 of us on this podcast are huge fans of the great sport of baseball. And I am guessing that your research has yet to uncover a Ellicott City or Savage or who knows, even Poplar Springs-based version of the Cambridge Canners or the Aberdeen Pigeons, or I believe they were called, or even some sort of intrepid group of 11 footballers who went out to Ohio and got themselves crushed 73-0 by the Decatur Staleys in the teens. I'm assuming that Howard County has been totally unrepresented in the world of sports from a team standpoint.
So about 5 years ago, we had an exhibit. It was a Smithsonian traveling exhibit that we hosted called Hometown Teams. And as a part of the exhibit, we were supposed to do a local exhibit. So we have almost a complete set digitally of every yearbook in Howard County's high school history going back to 1916. So I used digital images from all these yearbooks to create a Howard County sports history through the years. And it was pretty awesome. And so, as you look through this, you find there's a story to be told there too. Howard County, there was a Glenelg Industrial League team back in the in the 1910s. There was a Dayton team, and there was an Elkridge team, and then there were a number of different, I guess we would call them industrial league, semi-pro teams, much like what Babe Ruth played in before he got signed. Yep. So there were a few of them. We actually have the Merson family. If you're familiar with the name Merson, that is a long-time Elkridge family name. And there was Frank Merson, who played for the Washington Senators in the 1930s. In our collection, we actually have his Dayton team jersey that he wore back in the 1920s, I think. Of course, it's all wool, nothing you'd want to wear today playing baseball. But we have things like that. and lots of different cool stories sports-wise. So, yeah, we got that too, Bill.
That's very awesome. And one thing I mentioned to Jason way back when we were trying to get you on the show a few months ago is that you've been doing something very cool this spring and summer with modern day technology and baseball. Tell the viewers and listeners a little bit about that, because this is the favorite thing. I've been watching this like every day. I mean,
Yeah.
I voted for you not to discontinue it, so I'm glad you're keeping it going. But how are the O's doing in cyberspace? Tell us about this.
It's funny. Okay, so when I am a huge baseball fan, not only I played a little baseball when I was younger, I still play in a old man 45 and over league. I'm a baseball guy. You know, I bleed black and orange, right? And when COVID killed our Orioles season, I decided to use my son's MLB The Show game, and I fixed all the rosters so they were accurate. And then I started the season. I just started live streaming all of the Orioles games as they would have been played on Facebook. And you know, I started off with like 2 or 3 followers, and then I got up to like 70. And we were doing all right there for a while, but you know, just like the real Orioles, we fell off. I think last time I looked, I simmed the game. I don't have time to sit down and play them anymore. During the dog days of COVID, when I didn't have anything going on, I could just sit there and play. It was no big deal. But now I just sim them, and I think the O's are something like, oh gosh, I think we've definitely won 60 games. I want to say something like 61 and 91, which probably is pretty realistic. But DJ Stewart, I got a lot of crap because DJ Stewart in my sim had like 28 home runs. People were like, there's no way that guy would hit 28 home runs. Just hit like 5 in a row.
Right. That's all he does. He either strikes out, walks, or hits home runs.
That's right, because my sim is on point. I just want to.
Which is very cool, and I admit I have watched at least 3 of those games beginning to end.
Yes, it was fun for a while. I mean, at one point, early on in the season, I had buddies of mine who they were so into it. There was like 5 or 6 of us on a Zoom watching it like it was a real game, and they would, my buddies would be like, hey man, go in there and pinch hit for Chris Davis. I'd be like, no, I'm going to let the computer do that. That's the rule. Not going to interfere. We had some fun with it. It was a blast.
And we would like to make sure everybody understands this was for entertainment only, no gambling.
That's right. Wouldn't allow it.
So, Shawn, last question I have is to give you an opportunity to promote the organization. How can somebody who wants to learn more about the society get involved, volunteer opportunities, go by your website, what have you?
Yeah, so Howard County Historical Society, www.hchsmd.org. Obviously Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. You know, I look at our organization as in a couple of different facets. Obviously, we provide a community service by caring for and preserving artifacts and documents and photographs from our county's past. But we also have the service of providing access and then educating. And you know, my deputy director and I, we do independent research, we do lectures, you know, we try to take the stuff that's in our archives and take it out for everybody. But I also have this great facility in Ellicott City called the Museum of Howard County History. If you have not been there, it's probably one of the more stunning buildings, original buildings, original, 1894. I got to be careful when I say original. But there's nothing original from the colonial times. We've had floods, in case you didn't know that. So, but yeah, we're in an old church up at the top of the hill next to the courthouse, and not only do we have the museum in there, but it's a lovely space that we rent out. We had a small wedding in there a couple weeks ago. In non-COVID time, I would have bands in there all the time, good bands, blues, reggae, jazz, you name it. We've done. So in addition to being obviously a historical and cultural institution, we also have a really cool building that I try to rent out to help pay the bills. So there's my plug.
Excellent.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Just real quick thing. I just want to follow up. And by the way, on the jazz front, I noticed your Brubeck post of recently. So awesome. Is there anything you'd like to tease, looking down, anything in the future that we might expect from a programming perspective? Or if not, is there anything, I mean, obviously you probably have the opportunity to talk with other historians, and you're looking at the trends in the industry. Is there anything that you'd like to bring to Howard County as far as an exhibit or a different way of showing off our history?
Ellicott City 250th anniversary is in 2 years. So 2022 is our 250th anniversary. And the Historical Society, we spent some time in the academic world the last few years trying to elevate Ellicott City. You know, if you open up any textbook, it'll say that the birthplace of America's Industrial Revolution are the textile mills of New England. And we say, nope, 20 years before they were doing factory textile work in New England, we were doing the same thing right here in the Patapsco River Valley. So we make the argument, and Hal Sharp, who is a professor, has written a book that we helped publish, that Ellicott City is the birthplace of America's Industrial Revolution. So being that we're celebrating Ellicott City's 250th anniversary in 2 years, with the whole town, we're going to make a huge historical event out of this. I'm partnering, the organization is partnering with the Maryland Historical Society to have 2 different exhibits at our place and their place on the Ellicott family. There'll be all kinds of events all year long. So if anybody wants to kind of help us promote Howard County and help us promote Ellicott City. Obviously, we all know what's been going on down there the last 4 years. EC 250, we're hoping, will be a great opportunity for us all to kind of rejuvenate the town, really celebrate our history, and something we can all be proud of as Howard Countyans. So EC 250.
Sounds fantastic. Looking forward to it.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Shawn, thank you. You've been a wonderful guest. We've been very happy. Hope you've enjoyed this, and hope you'll consider coming on the show again.
Anytime. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, my pleasure. Jason, anything in closing?
As always, justice for Breonna Taylor.
181 days?
I believe so. Yep, 181.
Very good. Very good. And on that note, I would also like, on a little bit of an extra point, I should have mentioned at the outset, the Forward Maryland podcast now has a channel on YouTube. So, hi, YouTube. But if you go to YouTube channel, Forward Maryland, no space, just one word, you'll find us. So for Jason Booms, my name is Bill Woodcock. Thank you for watching another edition of Forward Maryland. Hope you have a great day, everybody, and a great weekend. Take care.